In the glass lobby of Harborstone Group in Boston, Vivian Hartwell, a multi-millionaire, CEO famous for cutting costs without blinking, held a termination folder in her cold hand when what she saw through the revolving door made her stomach twist. Outside, Ryan Whitaker, a single dad, was crossing the snow carrying a cardboard box. On top of a mug and a wrinkled jacket, a child's drawing shook in the wind. Two people holding hands and a smiling son. Ryan tried to hide his desperation, but the way he protected that paper gave him away. And there was one detail in that drawing, a detail that made Vivian's signature on his termination almost impossible to defend. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? City, state, or country? The paper was still warm from the printer when Ryan Whitaker, a dedicated employee and single father, walked out of the glass-walled office high above downtown Boston with his throat locked in that angered kind of silence. Outside, snow was falling thin and steady, sticking to the windows like an uncomfortable reminder. The Christmas lights strung on the street lamps below blinked red and gold, far too pretty for a day like this. He tapped his badge at the turnstile one last time, and nothing welcomed him, just a short, dry beep. The message on the screen didn't even need words. It's over. The cardboard box weighed more for what it meant than for what was inside. A cheap picture frame, a company mug, a jacket folded in a hurry, and on top of everything, a slightly crumpled drawing colored in with crayons. Lily, his daughter, had drawn the two of them holding hands, a smiling sun in the corner, and a crooked heart that looked like it was beating right there on the page. Ryan ran his thumb along the edge, trying to smooth it out without tearing it, like that paper was the only thing in the building that really belonged to him. A few coworkers suddenly found themselves too busy to look his way. Others glanced up and then down again, with that cowardly guilt of people afraid they'll be in the same hallway tomorrow. The HR rep had spoken with the trained voice of someone who learned how to turn off feelings at 9 in the morning. It was a difficult decision. Budget adjustment. The manager, the same one who used to say, "Great work," whenever he needed free overtime, couldn't hold Ryan's gaze for more than 2 seconds. Ryan wanted to ask where that adjustment had been when he was pulling all-nighters, when he covered whole projects on his back, when he stayed quiet because there was a little girl waiting at home. But what came out was just a low, "Okay," because arguing with a closed door only makes noise for you. The elevator went down too slowly, every floor peeling away another piece of what he'd built. It wasn't just the job. It was rent, groceries, medicine, the promise that it'll all be fine, said so many times it had become a reflex. When the doors opened into the lobby, the smell of pine from the decorations mixed with old coffee tied his chest in a strange knot. A security guard hovered nearby, not aggressive, just efficient, as if Ryan were suddenly a risk. He crossed the lobby clutching the box, feeling his hands finally start to shake for real. And the worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was the question he'd have to answer while looking straight into Lily's face. Outside, the Boston wind cut his skin like a blade. Cars splashed dirty slush from melted snow, and the city kept moving at its usual frantic pace, indifferent, glittering as if Christmas were just decoration. Ryan stopped for a second on the sidewalk, pressed the box to his chest, and pulled the drawing closer, just to look one more time at that smiling son his daughter had drawn, like the world really was that simple. He took a deep breath, trying to rehearse the right line so he wouldn't scare her. But the truth was, he didn't even know where to start. And as he walked into the icy night, one thing became painfully clear. If he could barely keep his own voice steady, how was he supposed to keep their entire life standing on his own? Ryan didn't become a single dad by choice, or because of some soap opera drama. It happened because life decided to cash everything in at once, and ever since then, he'd been stuck in survival mode. That Christmas Eve, walking through the Boston snow with the box in his arms, his brain was already doing math against his will. How much was in the bank? How many days they covered? What could be cut first? What hurt wasn't the number. It was the feeling that he was constantly walking with a child in his arms that no one else could see, trying not to let anyone notice the weight. At home, his world was small and repetitive, but it was real. A simple apartment, a heater that liked to quit at the worst moments, and a living room taken over by evidence that Lily existed. Crayons scattered everywhere, a picture book open on the couch, tiny socks abandoned in the hallway. Lily had a way of brightening the space, even when the day came down heavy. Ryan clung to that the way a drowning man clings to a floating board. He woke up early, made coffee, packed lunch, checked her coat and scarf, and rushed to work with guilt chewing at him from the inside. Because every minute away from her was a minute he couldn't get back. After his wife died, their routine turned into a silent pact. He would not fall apart in front of his daughter. He learned how to smile with tired eyes, how to say, "We okay," with a steady voice even when the sink was overflowing, and his mind felt like a trashed room. Some nights, after Lily fell asleep, he'd stand in the dark kitchen, staring at the wall clock, trying to understand how anyone keeps breathing when their chest feels that heavy. The bed felt too big, the silence too loud. And still, the next morning, he got up because she needed him. At work, Ryan was the kind of employee who never caused problems. He got there early, left late, took whatever landed on his desk. Not out of ambition, out of fear. Fear of running out of food, fear of late rent, fear of looking his daughter in the eye with no answers. He worked overtime like it was normal, like his body wasn't protesting. When someone said, "You're a strong guy," he just nodded, because the truth took too much energy to explain. He wasn't strong. He just didn't have another option. Now, without the job, all those small choices came back like a hammer. Lily's new winter coat, the simple Christmas present he'd promised, the medicine he'd put aside money for. Everything turned into a line of emergencies, with zero room to breathe. Ryan set the box down on the apartment floor, looked at the drawing Lily had made, and felt his throat burn. He could take a lot when it was just him. The problem was taking it while watching the light change in her eyes. And without knowing it while he was busy trying to organize chaos inside that small home. Someone across town was about to look at that termination in a very different way. And it was about to hit a nerve she'd sworn was already closed. High up in that same Boston building, behind a perfectly clean wall of glass, Vivian Hartwell, CEO of the consulting giant, Harborstone Group, stood with one hand braced on her desk and the other gripping a pen like she was still making a decision. Outside, the city looked like a postcard. Falling snow, glowing streets, the river below reflecting golden lights. Inside, her office barely acknowledged Christmas at all. Just one discreet decoration in a corner and a wreath that was far too expensive to feel welcoming. Vivian liked things aligned. Numbers, reports, decisions. People were always messier. When Ryan walked through the lobby with the box in his arms, she saw him from above, out of the side window that overlooked the entrance. That wasn't the kind of thing she usually noticed. An employee leaving was just a moving dot on a floor plan. But in that second, the dot stopped. Ryan froze in the revolving door, like his body was taking longer than his mind to understand what had happened. Then she saw what was on top of the box. A colorful sheet of paper, shivering in the small wind from the door. A child's drawing. Too alive for such a cold place. Vivian narrowed her eyes, as if she could zoom in just by trying hard enough. She tried to go back to the spreadsheet on her screen. She really did. But her mind wouldn't obey. The image of that drawing kept digging at her like a splinter. The absurd contrast between a Millionaire building and a father clutching a box like he was holding his own dignity. Vivian exhaled sharply, irritated with herself, and walked to the window. Down below, Ryan adjusted the box against his chest, carefully, as if something fragile inside couldn't afford to be bent. And for a brief moment, Vivian felt something she hated feeling. Discomfort, not pity, not guilt. A dry irritation, almost anger. Like that scene was invading a part of her she kept locked up for years. Because Vivian recognized the gesture without wanting to. The overprotective way he held something small. The way he swallowed his tears before they were born. It tugged at an old memory, not as a full movie, but in fragments. A long hallway, cold lights, the feeling of having no one waiting on the other side. She saw herself as a child for a second, clutching a cheap bag with her few belongings, trying to walk normally so nobody would notice she wanted to disappear. Vivian shut her eyes tight, as if she could erase the past in one blink. When she opened them, the snow was still falling, and she was still there, rich, powerful, with her chest tight because of a drawing that wasn't even hers. She went back to her desk and picked up the termination packet, the same stack of documents she'd signed in a rush between meetings. Cost reduction, the summary said, as if 2 words were enough to justify everything. Vivian ran her finger along the thick paper and looked at her signature like it belonged to someone else. Outside, Boston kept shining, ready for Christmas. But inside that office, something had shifted. And the more she tried to ignore it, the stronger the feeling grew that there was a hidden detail in that layoff. A detail that, if true, would turn her signature into an injustice she'd never be able to swallow. Vivian wasn't in the habit of reviewing anything twice. She paid people very well to do that. But that night, with Boston buried in snow and the building almost empty, she just couldn't leave. The city outside looked like it was in slow motion, and inside her office, the silence felt heavier than usual, like every click of the EVOC system was reminding her there was no one left to applaud efficient decisions. She kicked off her heels, loosened her blazer, and sat down again, staring at the stack of paperwork as if she were hunting for something specific, even though she didn't yet know what. She pulled the file for the man who had just left with the box. Ryan Whitaker, single father, she read. Performance review, excellent. Absences, none. Overtime, above average. Vivian frowned. It made no sense. Firing someone like that was stupid, even from the cold, numbers-only point of view she prided herself on. She flipped faster, looking for the real justification, and found a short email attached, almost casual, signed by the coup. Cut Whitaker's position. It solves this quarter's budget. He won't make a fuss. Vivian froze. The sentence stuck to her like grime. The anger came first, not the dramatic kind, but the clean anger of someone who realizes they've been used. This wasn't about cost reduction. It was about convenience. About choosing the quietest target. She felt heat rising in her face, and without noticing, crushed the edge of the paper in her hand. She stared at the crumpled corner and thought of the girl's drawing, bright and shaking on top of the box. He won't make a fuss. The line echoed in her head, like someone had said it about her years ago. Then the memory came back with a bitter taste. A cramped kitchen, weak light, a tired mother saying, "Just stay quiet, okay?" Because life was already loud enough. Vivian walked back to the window and rested her forehead against the glass for a moment, as if the cold might help organize her thoughts. She remembered things she'd buried successfully. The sound of coins being counted on the table, the fear of the heat being shut off in winter, the shame of wearing a borrowed coat. And she remembered, most of all, the day she lost her mother too soon, inheriting a permanent feeling that the world doesn't give second chances. So you have to take everything before it has taken from you. That had turned into a rule, and the rule had hardened into armor. But now, with her fresh signature on an unfair document, the armor felt heavy. For the first time in a long while, she wondered if she'd become exactly the kind of person she once swore to hate. She went back to her desk, inhaled deeply, and grabbed her phone. This wasn't just about fixing an administrative mistake. It was about facing what her company had turned into under her command, and what she herself had allowed herself to become. Vivian pulled up the COO's contact and hovered her thumb over the call button. The building was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She didn't want to look weak. She didn't want to admit that a kid's drawing had sliced through 20 years of toughness and landed where spreadsheets never could. But there was one thing worse than looking weak: staying unfair out of convenience. She dialed. The call rang once, twice, and went to voicemail. Vivian exhaled sharply, and without thinking too long, changed strategies. She called HR, Security Records. Each call was direct, sharp, the way she knew how to be. But now there was a new note in her voice: urgency. Something almost human. She wanted Ryan's address, his phone. She wanted to fix this before the night swallowed what little hope the man had left. When she finally got his personal contact, Vivian stared at the number on the screen like it was a thin line between two versions of herself. The untouchable CEO who cut costs without looking down, and the woman who knew in her bones what it felt like to be chosen because you won't make a fuss, tightened her grip on the phone and hit call. On the other side of the city, with no idea what he was about to hear, Ryan was about to pick up a call that could change everything or make his night even worse. Night had already swallowed Boston when Ryan finally set the box down on the apartment floor and stood there, too numb to take off his coat. The TV was on low just to fill the silence, but it didn't help much. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with a Christmas stocking half hanging off her foot and the drawing still in her hand, like she was guarding her own holiday. Ryan tucked a blanket around her and watched for a few seconds, trying to memorize that peaceful face, because that's what he was terrified of losing when the world started demanding payment. His phone buzzed on the counter, cutting through the air like a siren. Ryan checked the screen and felt his stomach drop. Unknown number with an area code he recognized from the company. He thought about letting it ring out. He really did. But his mind was already in. What if it's something worse? Mode, and his hand moved on its own. Hello? His voice came out low and rough, like he'd swallowed ice. On the other end, a professional-sounding voice, too rushed to be normal, asked him to come back to the building to sign an urgent correction. Ryan clutched the phone tighter, eyes on the sleeping Lily, like she was the most vulnerable thing in the world. Correction of what? He asked. The answer was short, cautious, like the person was afraid to say too much. That only made him more suspicious. He'd seen, "Come in, let's talk," turn into humiliation before. Even so, one detail wouldn't to leave his mind. No one calls at this hour on Christmas Eve for a whim. It was either a trap or desperation. Ryan gently woke Lily, helped her into her little jacket, pulled a knit hat over her messy hair, even as she grumbled, half asleep. "We're just going out for a minute, okay? I promise." He didn't explain out where, because he didn't know how without shrinking himself. He slid the drawing back into the box so it wouldn't get bent and headed down the stairwell with her in his arms, the wind smacking his face the moment he opened the building door. The snow had thickened, and the Christmas lights reflected in dark puddles, like the whole city was faking joy, while he carried a fear that was way too heavy. When they reached Harborstone's lobby, everything felt colder than earlier. Fewer people, more echo, the same artificial pine scent that fooled no one. The security guard looked at Ryan with surprise, like he'd just seen a ghost. This time, the turnstile opened. That alone was strange enough to make Ryan's heart pound faster. He rode the elevator up with Lily, pressed against his chest. On the top floor, the doors opened to a dim hallway, lit only by indirect lights and a faint glow from the main office. Inside, Vivian Hartwell didn't look like the woman from earlier that day. Her blazer was tossed over a chair, her hair less perfect, and a glass of water sat untouched on her desk, as if she'd forgotten how to swallow her own decisions. When she saw Ryan with his daughter in his arms, she didn't look away. And coming from her, that was already someone else. "I was wrong," she said. No preamble, and the word landed heavy in the room. Ryan stood still, unsure if this was real or some twisted game. "I signed without reviewing. And someone used that to do the easiest thing." She drew a breath, her voice cracking just a little. "You didn't deserve to go through that. Especially not today." Ryan didn't answer right away. He just glanced at Lily, now awake enough to stare around the huge office with exhausted, curious eyes. Vivian noticed the drawing in the box, like recognizing her own punch, and pulled a folder toward her. "Your job is back," she said, "with a raise. And with a flexible schedule that actually works for your life as a father, not just for our spreadsheet." She pushed the papers toward him slowly, like she was offering something fragile, and added in a tone softer than any boardroom would ever hear from her. "I'm not asking you to forget. Just let me fix what I can." Ryan ran a hand down his face, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. His pride wanted to spit out, "Now you remember I exist?" But exhaustion was louder. "I just want to work," he said simply. "Take care of my daughter." That's it. The simplicity made it hit harder. Vivian nodded, swallowing hard, and for the first time he saw something rare in her, real shame. As he reached for the pen to sign his reinstatement, still suspicious, still hurt, she pointed to a discreet bag in the corner of the office. "One more thing," she said quietly. Ryan understood there was something in that bag that wasn't just paper, something that might change Lily's Christmas before the night was over. Ryan walked out of Harborstone with the folder clamped under one arm and a plain-looking shopping bag in the other, trying to process how the same Christmas Eve could contain two completely different endings. The snow was still falling, now in heavier flakes, blanketing the street in white and muffling the city's noise. Lily trudged beside him, gripping his hand tightly, still half asleep but wide-eyed, like she was afraid he'd disappear again if she let go. Ryan didn't say much on the way home. He just kept taking deep breaths, feeling his chest loosen and ache at the same time. In the car, the heater was slow to kick in and the windshield fogged from the inside. He let the engine idle for a while, watching the street outside, glowing wreaths on doors, Christmas lights trembling in puddles of melted snow. He opened the bag on the passenger seat and found simple, thoughtful things. A set of kids' gloves and scarf, a grocery gift card with an amount far too generous to be just a nice gesture, and a small box clumsily wrapped, like someone who hadn't wrapped a present in years had tried their best. Ryan closed the bag carefully, swallowing hard. It wasn't about the money. It was about the rare feeling that someone had actually seen him. Back at the apartment, the place somehow felt less cramped, not because the walls had moved, but because some of the weight on his shoulders had. Ryan put water on to heat, opened the can of cocoa he'd been saving for the right day, and flipped on the small Christmas lights that Lily insisted on stringing in the living room. She climbed onto the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, feet drumming to warm up, watching him with that serious child look that picks up on everything adults try to hide. "Are we gonna be okay?" she asked softly, like it was a secret. Ryan knelt in front of her, adjusted her hat, and answered with the steady voice he'd trained his whole life. "Tonight. Yeah, tonight we are." They drank hot chocolate together, blowing on the steam, laughing when Lily burned her tongue just a little and made a face. Ryan gave her the gloves and scarf, and she put them on right away, spinning in the middle of the room like they were the best gift in the world. When she opened the clumsily wrapped box, there was a small ornament, a simple star, and a short note tucked inside. "So you, Allah, remember, there is still kindness out there." Ryan stared at the paper, feeling his throat tighten all over again, except now it was different. Not desperation, relief, the kind of quiet hope that doesn't make much noise but keeps a person standing. Meanwhile, across town, Vivian Hartwell stayed in her office longer than she needed to. She took a copy of Lily's drawing, the smiling sun, the two hands, and slipped it into a plain frame. Nothing fancy, like luxury wasn't the point. The building was silent, snow ticking softly against the glass, and Vivian set the frame on the shelf at eye level, where she wouldn't be able to pretend she didn't see it. It wasn't a trophy of goodness. It was a scar she'd chosen to keep visible. That same Christmas night, with Boston shining outside and the whole city pretending this time of year is easy, something stayed suspended between two places. In the small living room of a father who had almost lost everything, and in the huge office of a woman who realized too late what one signature can destroy. And the strongest detail wasn't the raise or the gifts. It was what that drawing came to mean for Vivian from that night on, and what she decided she would never again do with someone else's silence. That Christmas night, Ryan didn't celebrate any kind of luxury. He celebrated the basics finally making sense again. A job restored, the heater running, Lily smiling with hot chocolate in her hands. It all looked small from the outside, but to him, it was like the house had air again. Without putting it into words, he understood something simple. There are wounds money can't close, but the right gesture at the right moment can keep them from becoming permanent scars. On the other side of Boston, Vivian sat alone in her glass-walled office, surrounded by silence and power. For the first time in a long while, none of it felt like victory. Lily's drawing, kept in plain sight, became an uncomfortable reminder, not of guilt, but of limits. Because a signature can tear a family apart in minutes. And fixing it means facing who you were when you decided no one else really mattered. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Ryan's shoes, would you go back? And if you were in Vivian's place, would you have the courage to admit you were wrong before it was too late? Tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest, and if this story made you think of someone. If you connected with this kind of story, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Because here, we don't to tell stories just to pass time. We tell stories that remind us of something powerful. Sometimes the real miracle at Christmas, I senti a grand gesture. It asks the courage to say, I was wrong, and hold tight to the people who still choose to stay.